Flosstube, my name's Jess. I'm Cross Stitch Jess here on Flosstube and over on Instagram. My pronouns are she and her, and welcome to this new little mini series that I'm going to be doing. As if you're a regular viewer, if you've watched any of my recent updates, you may well be aware that I am planning to start Legend of Freya. In fact, by the time you see this, because I'm planning to put it up the day that I start, by the time you see this, I will have started. But because I'm planning to stitch out on organza, which is obviously quite an unusual fabric to do cross stitch on, I figured I would record and share that journey with you. I'm gonna preempt that I am not an expert in this. I have done one test piece and a bunch of things didn't go quite right or to plan, but that was the whole point of doing a test piece. So this first video is going to be showing you how I set up the fabric. I am personally stitching this using waist canvas because I wanted it to be 18 count scale rather than 14 count. The other common option is soluble canvas, but to the best of my knowledge and the best of my Googling skills, soluble canvas only comes in 14 count. It also only comes in quite small pieces, whereas waist canvas comes almost like on a bolt. It's not a very big, wide bolt, but so I have gone waist canvas. So this first video is going to be getting everything set up on my scroll frame and showing you essentially how I've gone through that process and how I've positioned where I'm going to position my first stitch. So for the majority of this update, we're going to head upstairs to my sewing space so that I've got a big flat table and cutting mat to lay things out on. So we'll jump over there and then come back and do like a top-down view to show you how I've counted to my starting spot. And then if you're interested in this, I'm going to make these their own playlist. So if you're interested in updates, make sure you're subscribed and you'll get the little notification thingy whenever a new video goes up, both this and my regular updates. But I believe you can follow a playlist. I don't know, it's my first time trying one of those. So if that's the thing you can do, subscribe or follow the playlist. Or if you're finding this further down the line, maybe there's already other stuff in the playlist, but go check that out for, I might do some stitch with me's, and I'm going to do all of the sort of key steps, so things like pulling out some of the waist canvas, and eventually I will psych myself up. I've hinted at this a few times. My test piece, as I said, didn't go quite to plan. I may or may not have cut a hole in my fabric whilst trying to deal with the waist canvas. And when I say the fabric, I mean the organza. So at some point I will brave editing and watching that disaster back. And that will also go up as partly a what not to do and partly a how I dealt with that problem. I suspect that a fair amount of this series is going to be me trying something and it not working and then having to go back and try something different. As I said, I don't claim to be an expert, but I figured why not share the journey. I will head upstairs and crack on with setting up the scroll frame. Enjoy. Okay, so we've moved upstairs. This is my first time filming this way, so bear with if there's not good shadows and things. I've done the best I can. So to run through the supplies, I guess, that I'm going to use for this. Editing Jess might jump in here and tell you I forgot something, but for now we've got my roller bars for my siesta no-sew frame. We've got 2 sidebars. We have my organza, which I have taken to my local fabric shop, and my brain's not giving me the word, alterations place? Taylor, that's the word. And she has very kindly hemmed this for me because I wasn't brave enough to do it myself. I have my 18 count waist canvas, which is quite a big piece. I've got my masking tape and some scissors, and then a needle and some thread. So what I'm going to do to start with, I don't know how well this is going to show up. So I'm going to move my needle minder out of the way for now. Sorry if that wriggles things a bit. So my fabric does have some, I don't know whether to call them imperfections or quirks. I'm not sure they're going to show up, but across here there are some ripples, I guess, in the fabric. And then at the other end, about the same distance in, so about 6 inches in from the end, there's also these kind of imperfect areas. So I'm aiming to put my stitching smack in the middle here. So what I'm going to start off with is picking one end. It doesn't really matter which because they both have the same thing on it. I'm going to take one of these bars and move those aside. And as you can see, I've had this cut and hemmed to be exactly the right size for these scroll bars. So all I'm going to do is tape this to the roller bar. I think I'm going to do this in sections. Normally for something smaller I would just do one long length, but I think I'm going to do this in sections. It's falling off the table, which is a great start. So I'm going to apply the tape and then pop it on here. I'm only going to very gently touch it on there for now. I'm going to pull the rest of the fabric up onto the table so it stops falling off. There we go. Yeah, I'm only going to lightly tack it on now because I want to try and make sure that this is as straight as possible. So I don't want to stick it down really firmly. Note to self, clear your workspace before you start sticking things. I'm just going to lightly sort of touch it on there for now. I'm going to put a section in the middle. No idea if my head is getting in these shots, so apologies if you're getting a nice view of the top of my head. There we go. I think I'm pretty happy with how that's gone on. It seems pretty even. I've got a little bit of gap on either side. So we're just going to go ahead and press that down all the way along. Make a little adjustment on that. So the gist is I just want that to be nice and straight. I'm going to flip it around and essentially just start to roll the fabric on. Now, I'm not worrying about doing this neatly or at tension. This is almost just managing the spare fabric. So you can see I'm just rolling all the way in. It looks like it's bunching more to one side, so I'm just gonna adjust back the other way a little bit. I don't know what I've done here. There's a weird wibbly section in the middle. Okay. I think maybe the problem here is where it's been edged. It's obviously a bit thicker, so it's wrapping tightly on those bits and then still coming in quite loose in the middle. So lesson learned, maybe I won't get it edged next time. I'll just deal with the fraying edges. Okay. We'll deal with that in a minute. For now, let's leave it this way around and get the other bar attached at the top. So exactly the same kind of situation. I'm just going to put some tape on and get it stuck down and then adjust to try and get it nice and neat. That is the basics, I guess, of putting any fabric onto a siesta no-sew frame. The added complexity is that we are now going to also need to add our waist canvas. So I'm going to pause for a second because in retrospect I haven't pre-measured to make sure I've got, well, I know there's enough here, but I just want to check which way around and how much margin and things I have. So I will be right back. Okay, so I've done some measuring, and for the height, so let me turn it around so it's the right way up. So for the, I could do it that way. No, for the height of the design, me thinking out loud. So the pattern is 307 tall, which when you divide it by 18 is just over 17 inches. So I'm going to give an extra inch of waste canvas just to be safe. I am going to leave this section at the top attached because it will help me attach everything to the scroll frame and have a little bit of wiggle room. And then widthways, it's about 12 inches, so 12.5, sorry, so about this wide. I was considering cutting the waste canvas and having this strip spare for something else, but I think just to allow me a little bit of wiggle room in like not having to get it perfectly centered on the organza, I think this will, I'm just going to leave it as a whole piece of waste canvas, and anything I can salvage at the end is a bonus. I would rather, I say in air quotes, waste a little bit of waste canvas than end up with Freya sort of not being centered and be disappointed that I can't frame her the way I might want. So my next step then, normally what I would do is just, again, use masking tape to attach the top edge of the waste canvas directly on top of the, where I've attached the organza, and then as I roll it up, accept that that top section will get trimmed off at the end. I don't have enough wiggle room on this piece of waste canvas to do that. So instead I need to put the sidebars on and get them tensioned to attach the waste canvas further down. Because otherwise, basically the gap to this sort of sketchy area of the organza, this is bigger than the spare that I have on the waste canvas. So okay, so for each of these bolts you will have a washer and the wing nut. You want to take both of those off and then slot both your top and bottom bars in. You'll notice on these they have a third hole. I believe the intent of that is you could put your two scroll frame bars on the two closest together, and then the top one is almost like a helper bar, so you can put a third bar in there, and it's to help with clamping. If you have a different type of frame stand to what I have, you can clamp it on there. So because I don't use that, I just use the full length of the bar and use the top and bottom ones. I find it easiest to put both bars on before you start tightening anything, because otherwise you get weird tension problems. So bars on first, and then you want your washer to go on next between your wing nut and your sidebar. And then I'm just gonna sort of loosely put those on. I don't want to tighten these yet because I haven't gotten the fabric set up how I want it. I'm just getting the bars attached so that when I do want to tighten it, it's a bit easier to do so. Okay, so frame is now sort of intact, but my fabric is still quite loose on it. So what I'm going to do is give this top one just one turn so that the tape is not taking all of the tension, and then I'm going to tighten this at the top. You can get little tools that help you tighten wing nuts if you have any kind of hand strength issues. And then I'm just going to tighten, move that out of the way for a second, just tighten this other bar. I think I'm just going to have to accept having this problem with the middle being a little bit looser. I am regretting my choice to get this edged in the way that I have. I guess for anyone who's not not seen this kind of problem before. Because these edges, to hem them, she's turned it over. So this is 2, if not 3, I think 3 times the normal thickness. So at the sides here, it's a lot thicker. So those edges are going to get quite nicely tensioned, and then the middle is going to still be quite, you can see here it's still quite loose, whereas these are less loose. I'm hoping it might sort itself out as we go, but I'm not. I'm also just making sure that the fabric is stretched sideways so that we're not just getting it bunch up in the middle. Right, so that is fairly snug. So it's not perfect. We're going to work on that though. I'm a bit annoyed because I paid to have this done, but I am tempted to just trim off these edges. I left myself loads of wiggle room, so where's my ruler gone? The design is only 12.5 inches wide, so it's only going to be this middle section. So I don't mind losing like an extra 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch off of each side. And that's exactly what I had to do. So I've done it off camera and jumped ahead here. So lesson number 1, don't get your organza hemmed when you're putting it on a scroll frame, because it does not work. I've already started and just stuck one side onto the bars here, so I'm just going to flip this over and we are going to stick the other end to the other bar. So that allows me to just scroll these bars up, realising that this bar is not the straightest, but I don't think that will be a problem. So I'm scrolling it almost all the way and then tightening it off. So I want this side to be quite tight. I'm going to spin it around so that I have the bar with less fabric on it towards me. So what I'm going to do now is take my waist canvas, which I have here, and I'm going to use it this way around, that way around even. So I've pre-marked on here from the bottom edge up to where these marks are is essentially my stitching area, and then this spare at the top is essentially my top margin. So I'm going to tuck, I'm going to tape. So you can either tuck the fabric and then roll it in to tension it, but the risk is that it might come undone if you ever loosen this top piece of fabric. So what I'm going to do instead is essentially just tape this over the top of the existing tape. So for this, because it's quite a rigid fabric, I am going to do it all in one length. And it's important that this is straight, so stick my tape there for a second. I'm going to put the scroll bar on my cutting mat here and just make sure that it's straight, so my side bars are straight on, and I'm therefore going to assume that my horizontal bars are straight on. And then I'm going to again use the cutting mat to sort of centre this. I am honestly just eyeballing this a bit, but I know I have plenty of width, so even if it's not centred, it's not the end of the world. Just fold the excess under for a second. It'll be easier to manage. So I'm just going to make sure that these edges are pretty straight to the cutting mat as well, and then get my tape, stick it across the top there. Helps having this, if I do it flat, it helps having this orange line as a bit of a guide as well. So that is firmly stuck to my fabric, and then I'm just going to line it up again and stick this down, hoping that that's straight. Okay, and again, I'm not super bothered about this top edge being straight. What I care about is these sides being parallel to the scroll frame. So that is now attached, and I can flip this over and we can start scrolling that on. So my marks, they're not so easy to see from this side, but I'm going to scroll until I've got tension on the organza. And then tighten the wing nut that's fallen off. Let's tighten this side while I've got it. Okay, so that is fairly well tensioned, and my waist canvas is really firmly attached. Like, I can pull on this, I can give this like a proper tug and it's going nowhere. So what I need to do now is essentially get the bottom edge also attached. So this can be a little bit more challenging because you essentially need to do it so that both pieces of fabric have the same tension. So what I'm going to do to help this is put a couple of rows of tacking stitches to essentially help hold it in place, so that when I get to the bottom it's almost like they're sewn together, they're the same piece of fabric. So I'm just going to grab a needle from up here on my stand, apologies for the wobble, and for this I'm just going to use some basic DMC. This doesn't need to be pretty. 310 is what I happen to have handy, although I am getting low, so note to self, put 310 on the shopping list. And I think I'm going to start that side. I'm going to turn it so that I can reach what I'm doing, and I'm just going to hold this tight because the organza is tensioned, the waist canvas is not. And I'm going to have to do this off the edge of the table, which I know is not in shot, but to get that first couple of stitches in. And basically, I would normally do this on my Lowry, but I am using my Lowry to film at the moment. So bear with for one moment. So all I've done to start with is put a couple of tacking stitches, and then I'm just gonna I'm lifting up the edge of the frame and using my thumb to sort of push the waist canvas away. I'm just gonna put a running stitch straight across the top there. Again, this doesn't need to be perfect. It's mostly just there to hold the fabrics together. The important thing is that you keep the waist canvas as tensioned as you can. I think the other thing to mention here is, I know some people would be concerned that these stitches, like when you add tension to everything when we're set up, will warp the organza. Organza is actually, and I don't know if it's just this organza or all organza, it's actually really resilient. So even if it warps a little bit, you can actually really easily sort of ping it back into its natural shape. So even if these don't end up being perfectly tensioned between the two fabrics and there is a bit of give or tugging, I'm genuinely not worried because I can very easily fix it when everything's taken off. So that's my top edge done. I'm just going to put some 3 or 4 stitches in the same spot to secure this end. So this is holding the fabric in place now, and all we're going to do is shuffle down. Oh, it's quite tight. Loosen these all a little bit. Turn this down some more. I'm going to go about there, and I'm just going to do it again. Maybe a bit more. Oh, because I'm lazy. There we go. And again, I want this under tension, so I'm just going to tighten this side as well. Okay, and I'm just going to do the same again, so I can actually see underneath here my previous row of tacking stitches. So I'm probably going 3 or 4 inches down and then putting another row in. I'm going to do this all the way down, and then I will come back when I've got to this this bottom edge, and I'll show you how I attach that into the bottom roller. Okay, so I'll be back in a bit. Okay, so I've done 3 rows of tacking stitches now, which means the bottom end of my waist canvas is now sort of on the front of the fabric. So I just wanted to jump back on and say, instead of carrying on to do more rows, I could probably do like 2 more rows before I get to the bottom. But to be blunt, I'm lazy, and this is not the most thrilling thing to be doing on a Saturday evening. So I'm just going to essentially tack straight across the bottom here to attach the bottom edge. So exactly the same, but instead of when I was the other way, I was pushing the waist canvas away from me to have tension. On this, I'm going to use my other hand. So I'll be stitching with one hand and use the other hand here, my left hand, to just hold it nice and tight and straight and tack along the bottom here. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back again. Okay, so we're all done. I've stitched across the edge here, and I didn't realise that was a knot, but I've tried to make this quite tight, so this is quite well tensioned, and I've done sort of a, I guess it's kind of like a mix of a running stitch and a back stitch. That's nice and secure. So what I'm actually going to do is flip this round and treat this as the top. So I will start stitching, where's my ruler gone? So I'm doing this to the base fabric, not the organza. So we're just over 24 inches, so I want to be roughly in the middle here. So 20, let's call that 24.5 inches. So I'm going 12.25. So I'm just going to mark on the selvage here. That is my midpoint, and I will start like as close to this top edge as possible. Hi Flosstube, I'm back downstairs. I have set up my scroll frame on my Lowery stand, and I'm going to talk you through how I found my starting spot. So if I show you the mock-up for a second. So this is what Freya's going to look like. Can I get that to go the other way? Yes. So this is what Freya is going to look like. I have no idea what the glare situation is because I can't see my phone screen right now, so apologies if that's terrible. But as you can see at the top here, she has her spear or the top of her trident sort of coming up to the left, and then you've got the top of the seahorse's sort of crown on the right. There is not actually anything in the top centre. So I don't want to do a centre start on this. I do want to start from the top and work down because it's easiest to pull the waste canvas from the outside edges. So what I'm aiming for is this top of the spear. What I have therefore done, trying really hard to make sure I'm not showing you the whole pattern. So at the top of the pattern here, we have a red centre line to show us where the centre is, and that's at 115 because this pattern is 230 wide. The spear, on the other hand, scroll all the way across, is at around the 35 mark. So that's about 80 stitches across in total, from the centre line to the top of the spear where I want to start. So what I've done is measured the full width of the organza, not the waste canvas, because I don't think I've quite got it perfectly centred. So the width of the organza, and then I found that and marked the midpoint. I've just marked this on my waste canvas because it's going to get pulled off anyway. So this little line at the top here, which hopefully you'll be able to see, is the centre point. I'm going to apologise in advance. I do have the camera attached to my tablet stand, which is attached to the Lowry, so every time I touch this it is going to shake it. That is in part why I've done this in advance, so that I can just point at things, so that you're not jiggling around all over the place. So from this centre mark, all I've done is count across 80. I've counted and put the pin in, and then I've counted again to check that I got it right. So this vertical pin here is 80 stitches out from the centre, so that represents essentially the column of stitches where I'm going to start stitching. What I've then done is had another look at this top part of the pattern, because it's obviously not right at the top edge. So this is about 12 stitches down from the top, and I've double checked on the top of the seahorse's crown, that's sort of 3 stitches down, and that's the highest point in the pattern, so they've got a little bit of sort of empty space around the edges. So I have subtracted that 3 stitches and then counted 10 down just to be safe, so I've given myself 1 extra stitch. So from my tacking line I've counted down 10 stitches, and that's where I've put this horizontal pin. I've just put the horizontal pin through the waste canvas, but it wouldn't really matter if I put it through the organza, because as I think I said when I was upstairs, the organza is actually really resilient, so even if you end up sort of smushing some of the strands to one side because of a chunky pin going in, you can actually really easily just sort of nudge them back into place, and it kind of pings back into place really. So essentially where these 2 pins meet is where I'm going to start. So that is going to be this bead in the little circle there, that means it's a bead. So that is going to be my first addition to this project, which by the time you see this I will have started. So this is all I'm going to include for this update. So be sure to subscribe, follow the playlist, all the good things, and come back, because next episode or next update I will be putting in my first stitches. So in the meantime, happy stitching. If you are working on Freya as well, please let me know, send me your Instagram, because I am super excited to stitch this, and I will only be more inspired and excited by seeing other people's progress as well. So yeah, let me know, and I will see you next time.